In the last episode, we talked about what your life was actually for. What is the purpose of your existence? In this episode, I want to explore Aristotle's answer a little bit. What is that thing at the end of that goal chain? When we ask all of the questions, what are you doing your job for? And you say, for money. And what do you need money for? And you say, for my family. And I say, what do you have a family for? You keep answering the questions, but at the end of all of it, what is there? It's the thing that you're supposed to want for its own sake. Something that is not meant to be a means to something else. Whatever that is, Aristotle is going to tell us that it has great practical importance for our lives, and that is going to be the ultimate source of our fulfillment, of our humanness. Welcome back to American Socrates. I'm Matt Rupert. Okay, let's start. Aristotle doesn't give us the answer right away. He doesn't leap right in. Like a good scientist, he decides kind of to conduct a survey of what people around him think the final end of life is. He collects opinions, he asks all kinds of people, and he records their answers. He argues that if you really ask enough people, you get four basic different types of answers. One, the goal in life is to have as much pleasure as possible. The second option is the goal in life is to have as much wealth as possible, to become as rich as possible. The third option is to live the life of honor. That is, to have a lot of friends, to be well respected in your career, to be well respected among your peers and associates. And the fourth and final option for him is the life of contemplation. Essentially, to be a philosopher, to think deeply about things and to engage in life's most meaningful questions. No doubt all of these have something to do with our final end in life. But the question is any one of them the good, the final good, the telos at the end of the process of being human? Aristotle calls this final goal, this final aim of being human, eudaimonia, which is a Greek term that if we translated it literally would mean something like good-spirited or good-souled. The idea here is that you have a good personality inside of you. You're the right kind of person to achieve this sort of ultimate end, this good end. You are fundamentally a good person. And if you think about it, this really jives with the idea of ethics, which comes from ethos, which means character. You're the right kind of character to be this kind of person to have a good life. And so the pursuit of ethics is the pursuit of cultivating your character in an attempt to achieve this final good. Now, we don't yet know what eudaimonia is. We just have a word for it now. But this concept of achieving a life's aim is set before us, and we can go through and look at the different answers that people gave and try and see if we can rule some of them out. So, assuming that Aristotle is right, that there really are only four possibilities here, then if we can eliminate three of these possibilities through the simple process of elimination, we should be able to determine what is the best path to cultivate our character in order to achieve the best life. Now, Aristotle's pretty explicit about which one it is, and he doesn't beat around the bush for very long. He argues that eudaimonia is not pleasure, it's not wealth, and it's not honor. It's the life of contemplation, which shouldn't come to us as any surprise considering that Aristotle himself is a philosopher. At the same time, it's worth looking for a second at his different answers here. He says that when you ask people who say that it's pleasure, like why it's pleasure, the people that you're talking to tend to be average, ordinary, poor, working class people. We're not talking about the elites of ancient Greek society, where these are not the leaders. This is not the generals. These are the foot soldiers. Life is about chocolate chip cookies. If you can get a couple extra chocolate chip cookies, that makes life just a little bit sweeter. The best things in life are taking it easy, getting an extra day off, playing some video games, having a good meal, getting laid. Those sorts of like everyday pleasures. The more of them you've got, the happier you are. The problem, Aristotle says, with pleasure is that, well, it's not really all that fulfilling. When you think about some of the like higher order pleasures, we run into this problem where, an Oreo cookie is really good, guys, but it's maybe not as good as, say, falling in love or landing a job you absolutely love, or coming to know yourself and understand yourself, getting clarity about who you are as a person. Those sorts of insights, those sorts of largely intangible things often are much better and much more rewarding than, sinking your teeth into a Oreo cookie. And so it's not that the Oreo is not pleasurable. It's just that I don't know if there's enough Oreo cookies in the world for me to trade my wife for those cookies or one of my children. Theoretically, like if these were all like quantifiable, we would be able to do so. We would be able to name a number. And what Aristotle's sort of suggesting here, like Epicurus after him, is that that's not really the case. These pleasures don't stack in that way. And so no matter how much pleasure we have, we're not going to end up at this ultimate goal. So it's not exactly pleasure. We want pleasurable experiences. We want good pleasure, but pleasure fades. Pleasure's kind of weak. In that sense, it's not the ultimate goal itself. Okay, so pleasure's out. The second one was wealth. And he said, that's the answer you get every time you ask a rich person. Every rich person you talk to, they all say the same thing. It's about being wealthy. The most important thing in life is having as much money as possible. Wealth is bad for two reasons. The first one is that it's only ever a means to another end. Nobody wants to be wealthy, just to hoard up a bunch of stuff. They want everything that goes along with it. The ability to purchase all the Oreo cookies they want, for example, or the prestige, or at least the perceived prestige of having people, interested in their ideas because they want access to their money. Like they want to be thought of as smart and hardworking and better than other people. And by having a lot of money, they can sort of get people to treat them that way in exchange for the money. And so the idea here is like, it's always something else. It's never wealth in and of itself. And this is supposed to be the final aim. Eudaimonia is the end goal. It is not something that we're supposed to be trading for something else. So it can't be wealth on that account. The other reason he says wealth is a bad one is because it's so easily taken away from a person. That basically it's your whole existence, your whole value in life is something that someone could rob you like a thief in the night of. And he said, that kind of insecurity often means you don't really have a good life because you're always worried about your money and holding on to it and trying to keep it from people. So wealth is out. Pleasure is out. The third option is honor then. Honor, he says, are people's opinions of you, but those are problematic too because people's opinions can be withdrawn. They can be changed. People might think of you as a good person now, but if you say the wrong thing, you're apt to get canceled. You can't really have any sort of security in and of your own ability to thrive in life if it is entirely dependent upon the opinions of other people. And so, well, yes, we do want to have these relationships and other people's opinions should matter to us. They can't be the sole determining factor in what makes us happy in life. Another thing that he says about this is sort of the idea that you could do absolutely nothing and become famous, which is sort of the flip side of it, right? You could survive a plane crash. And since you were the only survivor, you become famous on TV. People give you money. You get all this love and sympathy because of, the terrible tragedy that you went through. And all of that It wasn't anything that you did. You just happened to not die in a plane crash. It was pure luck, pure circumstance. And so honor, he said, tends to be kind of fickle and ultimately can't be the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Relatedly, we could introduce sort of a fourth one about this idea of power and control, which is somewhat related to honor and to money. But it's going to depend, again, on what we do with that power, because power ultimately turns out to be pretty instrumental in Aristotle's thinking. So all of these are ruled out by Aristotle. So there we have it. We had 4 options. We ruled out 3 of them. That leaves just one. And through process of elimination, disjunctive syllogism, if you will, we have our answer. It can't be any other answer. Congratulations. Now we know it's the life of contemplation, and now we know how to live. That's kind of not a compelling argument. Luckily for us, Aristotle offers us a different argument. This other argument goes something like this. The greatest ends in life tend to be the final ends. They are the reason we do things. Like no one goes to law school just to take the bar exam. They go to law school to take the bar exam, to become a lawyer, to accomplish something in life. They want to help people. They want to make money. The farther along the chain we get, the more important the ends become. Now, he also says that reason is something unique to humankind. Now, this gets translated a little differently, but essentially the idea here is that logos is what essentially makes us human. That our ability to think, our ability to reason, our ability to speak, our language, our ability to argue is what separates us from the other animals, right? Eagles can soar, tigers have claws, horses can run, humans can think. That is our thing. So if you've ever heard the saying that man is the rational animal or something like that, that was Aristotle, and this is where he said it. Another way to think about this is that the telos of humanity is logos. The end of being human, the best you can do at being human is to reason. That is you being your most human. Therefore, rationality being our proper function, and to function properly is our purpose in existing, just like the purpose of the acorn was to become the oak. The act of fulfilling our purpose is eudaimonia, meaning that reasoning or logos is eudaimonia. That is you fulfilling yourself. So to put this in more concrete terms, what he's trying to say is you want to think. You love thinking. Thinking is one of the most pleasurable and interesting activities that you can possibly engage in. I want you to think about this for a second. Think about all the ways that we think we're not thinking when in fact we are. When we play games, we play board games, when we play Dungeons and Dragons, when we play video games, right? When we play sports, we are just solving problems. That's all we do. We make up problems. These are fake, artificial problems that literally no one has, and we solve them for fun because we like thinking through problems. It's what we do. It's us at our best. When we watch TV, when we watch movies, even when we listen to music, we judge the artists, we judge the characters, we judge the production on how well we think it was. That's thinking. We're trying to say that character acted foolishly. I wouldn't have solved my problems that way. Or, oh my God, how tragic. They couldn't have done any better. We spend all this time thinking and contemplating and trying to understand. We like to think that we like shutting off our minds, that we like basically going to sleep, but that's definitely not true. We like to be engaged. We like to have these problems. Even when you're watching someone else play sports, you are sitting there watching them play a game that has no consequences and yet at the same time is incredibly important to you, and you wonder if they're doing a good job, how they could have done something different, things like that. This idea that we find pleasure just in the very act of thinking and reasoning is what he means by the life of contemplation. And not just that, because it's also through the life of contemplation that we're going to get those other things too, that we're going to find what is the most pleasurable for us, that we're going to figure out ways to make money and become wealthy, that we're going to figure out how much wealth we need, that we're going to figure out how to make friends and maintain relationships. So this problem-solving skill is not just pleasurable in and of itself, it also brings us all of these rewards, these consequences that are also pleasurable, that we also like. So winning in life is really a matter of becoming a reasonable person, learning how to find the truth and the desire even to seek the truth, as opposed to just going with whatever answer people bring to you. So eudaimonia, the best life, according to Aristotle, is lodged in the idea that you have to reason. Another way to put this is that for Aristotle, eudaimonia is the condition of a person who is living and functioning in accordance with their highest capacities. In other words, they're fully engaged, they're fully developed, they're fully exercising everything that is interesting and unique and best in themselves. So eudaimonia isn't activity, really. It's not like a state of being. It's not passive. You can't just sit on your ass and be happy. You have to be engaged in this. Eudaimonia often gets translated into English as happiness, but I think that's actually a really poor translation. Probably a better translation is something along the lines of human flourishing. The idea that you are excelling at being human, what is making you the most human. But even that can be a little tricky. I think the best way to think about eudaimonia is that idea of cultivating yourself to be the constant learner, the constant person who wants to know and just wants to find the truth and wants to find the answers, because that person is going to succeed more often. They're going to make fewer mistakes. They're going to enjoy the process of learning and growing. And ultimately, it's just a reward in every direction. So you don't have to have eudaimonia the way you have to have a bank account. You either do it or you don't in the way that you live. The distinction here is kind of practical. It means that eudaimonia can't be given to you by your circumstances. It can't be taken away from you by your circumstances either. And in that way, eudaimonia is a really stable thing to pursue. If you pursue this as a human being, it's achievable, kind of no matter what. I mean, Aristotle said that, if life is going to hand you lemons, that essentially the wise man knows how to turn those lemons into lemonade, right? The poor man goes, oh man, life sucks. And so, if you can think through your problems, even when you're dealt a shitty hand, you can make the best of it. And so there's just a way of winning at life with this pursuit of eudaimonia through reasoning. The person in difficult circumstances who's exercising the best of their capabilities. They're thinking as clearly as they can. They're acting with as much integrity as possible. They're engaging as fully with what is in front of them as they possibly can, is closer to eudaimonia than an incredibly comfortable person who's coasting through life because they were born with wealth. They were born with all the privileges. Eudaimonia is not a consolation prize for not winning life. This is not like a second order thing. What he's trying to say is that the person who's coasting, even the billionaire out there, may very well be a miserable sack of shit. You're not necessarily winning at life because you're wealthy, because people pay attention to you, because, you have power, or because you have a lot of pleasure. Those are not the kinds of things that necessarily bring a fulfilling life. Okay, to try and prove this in sort of concrete terms, I want to go back to that idea that we enjoy games and sports and, movies and stuff like that because it engages our capacity for problem solving. If the satisfaction of these things comes from the genuine exercise of our human capacities, from actually working through the problem, then anything that bypasses that, anything that cheats it, anything that cuts the corners, so to speak, ultimately takes away the victory. We feel this about games. We do. Like, cheating is probably the clearest example. A person who cheats to win, let's say, a chess game has not really solved any kind of chess problem. They have obtained some sort of external marker for having solved it. They get a win. They get a little status mark in their record book or something. But they skipped the thing that actually made the winning meaningful. The win becomes hollowed out, not because of a moral violation, although that is real too, but because the satisfaction of genuine problem solving never got produced. They skipped it. And you can't cheat your way to the pleasure of figuring something out, of understanding, of knowing, the security of having the ability to find the right answers when you need them, knowing that you can rely on yourself in that way. There's no way to cheat that. You either do the work or you fail. This extends directly to the larger argument we've been saying about eudaimonia here. A life organized around obtaining the markers of success, things like wealth and status and honor and power and pleasure and stuff like that, without the genuine exercise of our human capacity, those markers are supposed to reflect that kind of capacity. Well, that's a life that's made some kind of error. The same way the chess cheater has ended up robbing themselves of the value of their own victory. You end up with the right score, but you still kind of lost the game. So the external indicators here are present. The thing that they're supposed to indicate is what is absent. Another way to put this is that the person who gets like a promotion through, let's say, politics rather than through performance, right? They're handed out a reward because they're loyal to the people in charge rather than because they actually merit it in any kind of way. The person who maintains the appearance of a good relationship without doing any of the actual work, without actually trying to be a good partner to their spouse or a good parent to their children. They put on the airs of caring for someone. They pretend very, very well. They make sure other people think of them as a good parent or a good partner. But the reality is they're not. The person who performs all these markers of a thoughtful life, they read the right things, they watch the right movies, they go to the right church, they say the right things to the right people at the right time, they have the right opinions, they make the right kind of gestures, they don't do the taboo or forbidden things. Those people, without genuine engagement, have substituted the signal or the symbol of the thing for the thing itself. They don't actually get the good life because they're pretending. They're making theater of what was supposed to be real. Aristotle's word for the hollow markers stripped genuinely out of activity is hollow. It's not being wicked. It's not having failed at life. It's being hollow. The structure is there. The substance is missing. It's the hollowness of life. And I think that's where a lot of us end up, is living these sort of hollow existences where we go through all of the motions. We sometimes even achieve the things that we've set out to achieve, and it just rings hollow in the end because we didn't actually go after eudaimonia. We didn't actually go after this idea of setting our own goals and finding our own purposes and doing it with meaning. There's a persistent cultural assumption, I think, that things worth doing are difficult and joyless, while the things that are genuinely pleasurable are shallow. But again, Aristotle doesn't accept that kind of division. His argument has been that these highest of human activities, this genuine thinking, this real problem solving, even when it's about fiction, sports, things that like the outcome really isn't like life or death. Even when it is about those, they're not just valuable for these consequences. They're intrinsically pleasurable. We love doing them just for themselves, for the sake of having done them. The key phrase that I think you should take away from this episode is we have to develop our capacity for thinking. The pleasure of genuine contemplation is not immediately available to everyone in the way the pleasure of, say, sugar or entertainment is. When you put a spoonful of sugar in your mouth, you are pre-programmed by nature to enjoy it. This kind of capacity for thinking and contemplation requires practice, which is what I actually want to talk about in the next episode when I talk about like habit. How do we form this into a habit, which is something that Aristotle spends quite a bit of time talking about. You want to become a thinker, then you have to do thinking. The same way, if you want to be a courageous person, you have to do courageous things. Your capacity is going to grow through the exercise of what it is that you're doing. And as it grows, so is going to grow the pleasure you take in exercising it. I don't want to leave you with the idea that the life of contemplation is something for academics or for the leisure class, or that people who have to work for a living don't have time for this. You do. The problem for you is mostly what you're aiming at has been taken. The best problem-solving abilities in your mind are being used to make someone else money. And because of that sort of alienation of your own mind, it sort of rings hollow. When you have to end up focusing on these external pleasures, the little breaks here and there, the drag off of a cigarette, the first bite into a warm, cheesy bacon sandwich. The contemplative life is not about what you do for a living. It's about the quality with which you're going to engage and bring to what it is that you do. Whether you are genuinely working on a real problem in your life or, like I said, just practicing or playing a game. And the pleasure of genuinely working the problem is available to absolutely everyone who is willing to develop their capacity for it. So I want to end this episode by trying to sum up what we did in the last episode and how this is supposed to answer the question. Aristotle's answering that question, what is your life really for? What is its purpose? With this idea of the exercising of your highest capacities, sustained over the course of your entire life in conditions that will ultimately allow you to flourish as an individual. That's what it means to achieve eudaimonia. It's not a simple feeling. It's not a reward for doing something right. It's not a destination or a goal in and of itself, but it's an activity that allows us to constantly achieve our goals as we work through our day-to-day existence. The evidence that he's right, I think, is pretty much all around us. We invent these fake problems to solve because solving problems is so satisfying. We follow fictional people through their fictional crises because they engage our capacity for moral and practical reasoning, which is, again, satisfying. Satisfying enough to spend money on. The contemplative life is not the life of someone sitting quietly in a library. It is the life of someone who is genuinely engaged with everything that they're doing, whether they're consuming art or whether they are making art or whether they are playing games or whether they are teaching history. It doesn't really matter. They're developing their capacity to meet all of the problems they're going to face and finding in that engagement something that no amount of external success can really ever be substituted for. So your final question for this episode is, where in your life are you genuinely working the problem? Fully engaging, developing yourself, exercising real things, and where are you just keeping these external scores? Thanks for tuning in to American Socrates. If today's episode of Philosophy got you thinking in new ways, make sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. New, full episodes drop every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review. It helps others find us, and it means a lot. And if you know someone who could use a little more practical wisdom in their life, share this episode with them. Until next time, keep questioning everything.